Okay, here's what I've done so far this morning. I started bending the lining on the top and totally forgot that I hadn't done the other two corners, trimming the corners. So I stopped doing the lining and went back to trimming these two corners. And one of the things you do as you are doing the corners and then afterwards is make sure that the distance, that these are symmetrical. And the way you check that is you use one of these compasses and you put it on any point on the center line. So for example, I put it on the center line here, doesn't matter where. And then you open the compass until you reach the length of one of the points, the end. And right here is about the end of that point. And then you just swing it around to double check to see whether your other point matches. So let's do that. I didn't. So right there, say, and then this side matches. You can't see it too much because of those clamps. But then you do the other side the same way. And so, for example, I guess I should do it. Yeah, I can't do it there because the clamps will block it. So say I put the compass on that spot on the center line, and I adjust this compass so it's at the end of this corner, and then I switch around to double check to see that it matches the other side. I don't have them perfect, but they're good. They're still good. And then I went back to bending the spruce linings, which are, it's like this. I had to thin it because it came to me about, I don't know, about 10 millimeters wide this way. And I needed about 7.5. And so I used a marking gauge to narrow it down. You can afford to have the part that you cut a bit uneven, because mine, I was using an X-Acto knife to cut it after I had marked it with the marking gauge, because you're going to be placing this above, like for example, if I was putting it here, you'd place the lining a little bit above, a skosh above the rib, because you want to have some to plane down and to sand down, and say a 64th or something like that. And then you bend it. This one is spruce. Sometimes I've used willow, which I think is easier to bend, but I didn't have any willow, and it's kind of harder to find the willow linings. And I raised the temperature on the bending iron to, let's see, what is it? 185 degrees Celsius, which they say is better to have it higher because the linings are thicker, about twice as thick as your ribs were. So it'll take more heat to bend it. And the first thing you do is, I don't know if you can see it, but right here, you have to cut a little recess about 7 millimeters deep for the lining to sit into the block. And you see it's raised above the block. because at the corner bout, it's so curved that you have to have something to hold the rib there. I mean, the lining there, because it's curved so much. When you do this bout and the upper bout, you don't need to. You can just do it flat against the block because it's a gradual curve. And so you have to cut it there and cut it there. And that's tricky because you're cutting against grain and just using, I was using, you use an X-Acto knife to cut the lines down, and then a tiny, tiny chisel to kind of dig it out. And then you use fish glue to, well, you bend it first, and that's really tricky. Again, even harder, I think, than bending the C-bout or the ribs, because this is thicker and harder to bend those gradual curves in a thicker piece of wood. But the purpose for the lining is twofold. Number one, it gives stability to the ribs because you'll have lining on both sides, so it makes it nice and sturdy and strong. But also, it gives more gluing surface for when it comes time to glue on the top and the back. Can't find that little piece. Where was the little piece? Well, anyway, so for example, this is about 1 millimeter, the rib, plus 2 millimeters, so you'll have about 3 millimeters of gluing surface, which is what you need for a solid gluing of the top plate and the back plate. After I've got all the linings, I have notes here to remember what order I'm doing things in, because each time I do it differently. I kind of don't do it the traditional way. After the top linings are in and set, then what I do is I finger plane them and sand them level with the blocks on the sanding board. And then with the garland still in the mold, linings only on the top, I draw the shape of the top plate and the shape of the back plate onto the top and back plate material, which I need to prepare beforehand, kind of make them flat and everything. But I do that. So I do the outline of the garland, but then also with a washer 2.5 millimeter away from the shape of the garland. That will be the shape of the plate itself, beyond the garland. And so I draw that onto the plates and cut those out close to the line, close to the outer line, but not all the way to the line. And then what I have done lately is I go back to this and I remove the garland from the mold because I have linings here and no linings on this side. So it's easy enough to slip the mold out. You still have to remove the mold from the blocks, but they're only stuck on with like 1 dot of Titebond at the blocks, center of the blocks. So that's not too difficult to remove. But since I don't do the linings on the back side until later, I can then slide the mold out. And what I have done as well is, in order to keep, the linings on the top will hold this part firmly, but I want to make sure that the back is held firmly in the correct position even when it's out of the mold. So what I have done, is I made this clamp the last time. In fact, this I made for the Plowden. That's just sized exactly for the size of the C-bout center. So I can slide it in, and if I need to, I can put tape around these legs if it's not tight enough. But it appears to be tight enough. And I can put it, I can't put it all the way here yet because of those clamps, but I put it there, and that holds everything still tight against the mold at the C-bout. And that's what I want to make sure to do later when it comes time to glue the back linings. And so after I've removed the mold from the garland, then I use this to hold the C-bouts firmly, and then I glue on the, remember this is going to be gone, I glue the linings onto the back. Okay, and that will hold everything. It seemed to work last time I did this. This held everything nice and in the right form without, you know, distorting or anything. And then at that point, with the top and the back plates marked, I can do the working on the plates, which that takes a long time. So the first one I do is usually the top plate, and there's a lot involved: the carving of the outside, the carving of the inside, the sound holes, the base bar, the graduating so the thicknesses are correct, and so on. So that will take a long time. Once the top plate is done, then I can either work on the back plate, but usually what I do is glue the top plate onto the garland. Again, the mold is not there anymore. And then I can work on fitting and fitting the neck. And then I'll glue the neck in. After that, I'll work on the back plate, and that takes a long time, especially because it's maple. And then after that's all done, then I'll glue the back plate on, and so on. So that's kind of the order that I think I'm going to do it again this time. The traditional way that people do, violin makers, seems to be that they glue the top on, they glue the back on, so you have a closed box. Of course, you don't have the mold in there anymore. And then you do the fitting of the neck, which is, I think, harder when you have the back plate here that blocks you being to easily work on that mortise there. And what they also do is, before they remove the garland from the mold, they tend to have the linings on the top and the linings on the back glued. But to me, that just makes it much harder to remove, because the back linings block you easily being able to get the garland off. It's doable, but you have to kind of stretch the garland, and I'd be afraid of it breaking or something. So anyway, so that's the next step. The thing about this project is, that will save some time, is I have already made the neck, made the scroll. And so that's all ready to go, because that takes a long time. Because originally I had made the scroll just as a practice to get more experience in carving a scroll. But it turned out so nicely that I thought, okay, I'll make another Guarneri Plowden. And so far, I'm doing better on this. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be doing. The next step is doing the linings on this side. Okay. That's what I had to do today. Right now it's about 1:40 p.m. on Monday, November 17th.